started. It's about after 5 o'clock. Thank you for coming this evening. Karen and I really appreciate this. And we're glad that you're here. What we'd like to do is take a roll call, which basically says that Karen and I are here from the City Council. The City Council, the entire council was invited. The gentleman refused to come, and the mayor tried to cancel this meeting today. But Karen and I, because it's a special meeting, 2 council members can hold the meeting and call for it, and we can move forward without having to have the mayor bless it. So that's what we decided to do. So what we're going to do tonight is basically, we don't have a quorum, but we can talk about the issues that we have concerns with. But we also want to hear from all of you about what your concerns are and your questions about the Planning Commission ordinance, because that's basically what we're going to be talking about this evening, is the document that I handed out, and just looking at what needs to be done. What Karen and I believe is that we have 2 ordinances on the books for the Planning Commission, and they never rescinded the first one, so we now have 2 ordinances that are in conflict with each other. So the Planning Commission is in a precarious position, and I'll let Kara kind of go through some of that. But we do appreciate your being here. We'll give you opportunity to ask questions, and we have to be out of here probably by, I would say, we're hoping about 6 o'clock. It can be 6:30, but the Historical Society is coming in at 7, so we need to make room for them. So, Kara, do you want to take over?
Sure. So we're going to be following as close as we can to Robert's Rules of Order to have some order to our meeting. And I would like to open up the podium, well, not the podium, but maybe people can stand and talk. You don't even have to come up to the podium. But we want to make this very interactive and get a lot of feedback from the residents that came tonight to discuss problems with the ordinance and how you as a community would like to go forward with this. And maybe even open it up to, in general, how should we open up the Planning Commission and applicants for future vacancies that we may have on the Planning Commission. I know that everyone is very respectful when they take the podium usually, and so I don't have any concerns, but I don't want this to be a bashing session to go into talking about how poor the old ordinance. I want this to be very productive and how we can make it better in going forward with the city. How we can correct the problems and work out any kinks that the ordinance may have, so that way the Planning Commission is truly protected going forward. I did do a little bit of research and found out that under Minnesota statute there's a 3-year period that exists where new statutes can be challenged. And so I want people to understand that Katie and I are not up here to simply complain about an ordinance. We really are trying to make this interactive with the community to say, how can we better establish our Planning Commission? How can we protect our Planning Commission so that during this 3-year period, every decision that comes out from the Planning Commission won't be challenged and won't set our city up for a lot of unnecessary debate. Of course, if there's issues that need to be addressed, we would address them, but we want to make sure that our planning commissioners are secure in their roles, especially as new ones come in. We want to make sure that they're able to be set up at the beginning, get trained in, and be effective members of our city, essentially. So you want to take it from there and maybe just kind of guide me through what you'd like me to talk about?
Well, I think, why don't we look at basically the points that we have under the notice of the special meeting.
Okay. So many of you have the special agenda in front of them, and we thought we'd start out with talking about the validity of ordinance number 130, which is the proposed ordinance that the majority of the council had, quote, passed last meeting. And we wanted to talk about some of the issues that we have with this ordinance, and maybe then we can open it up to the residents to talk about some of the issues that you see as well and how you would like to go forward with that. During the last meeting, I don't want to highlight every one of the points that I had put on record, but there was a substantial number of procedural issues with how that was passed. It's very important that city council and government follow order when they're passing motions, when they're passing ordinances, because they can be challenged. You want to make sure that any amendments you make to ordinances, any new ordinances you put on the books are done so appropriately, because there's a 3-year period that these can be challenged. Therefore, it's extremely essential that the staff help the city council and that the city council take the appropriate steps to make sure that any ordinance passed is appropriately passed. I'm a lawyer, and a lot of times when procedural mistakes are made, it's a quick way to get rid of a case or knock people out. So it's extremely important to follow and make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed when we're doing this. Just to cover a couple, and again, I'm not going to take up the time in this meeting since we're trying to open this up really to the residents tonight. Some of the procedural flaws, it really boils down to transparency. This was not a transparent process that was done. When the ordinance was first proposed, it was done so with extreme bias and pushing it through. This followed on the heels of a bunch of editorials, and under Robert's Rules of Order, the person who chairs the meeting and proposes these ordinances has to do so without bias. That's so we can open it up to a fair debate and we can discuss the issues. Some of the other issues that we had throughout this process, during the, I believe it was June 13th meeting, the motion that was made, very unclear. I heard many comments from residents walking out of there saying, what the heck is actually in that ordinance now? Nobody knew. I didn't know as a council member what the final wording of that ordinance was going to be. We need to follow procedures so that way it's clear what the motions are about, what's in the ordinances, so we as a community understand what our government is doing. Some other points that I made was we have ordinances on the book. For example, Ordinance 31, very important ordinance. It says that we should be doing this with one document. The way staff had proposed this and prepared us as city council members, it was 2 documents. So it was very unclear what the motion was about, what was being passed. The old ordinance was never rescinded. The motion was never passed to rescind it. Therefore, we now have 2 on the books. That's very confusing. Which one governs? One has actually been past the 3-year period, so that is effective law. The other one is still in this new 3-year sort of trial period where it can be challenged. So it's a very interesting time right now to have the 2 motions. And then just a few other notes that I have for clarity and transparency to the public. The final version of 34, it should have come back to council, so council understood what was being voted on. We could have discussed it at a meeting again, so the residents of the community understood what was in the ordinance. We have many wise people in this community, well-educated people in this community, and they're able to look at this ordinance better than I am even. And the feedback that we were getting about the ordinance and the publication of it was amazing. It pointed out a lot of the problematic language in the published notice, which I have a copy of here if anyone's interested, that went out in the paper. And even the language as it was published was conflicting. Katie and I are grandfathered in, for example, under the 150 ordinance. They didn't make it retroactive. They forgot to do that. So therefore, we still have our seats, yet in the last meeting, they've appointed new people. I don't think that's fair to the new people that want to volunteer for our community to volunteer and then to have this unclarity as they start their volunteer process on the Planning Commission. In addition, in order to remove one of the members, one of the council members, it says that it has to be cause, there has to be a supermajority vote by the city council. I'm not aware of any city council meeting that was had where a supermajority vote had removed us, for example. Other issues, compensation, for example, it talks about how city council still has in its discretion the ability to compensate planning commissioners. One of the key points that was relied on during the meetings that was raised by our former city attorney, Mr. Magnuson, was there's a conflict of interest to receive compensation as planning commissioners. They put that language back in there. So do we want to have compensated planning commissioners, or do we want to make this a truly voluntary position? I mean, these are things that I think we should be opening up to the community to get feedback, to see how do you want your government structured in North Oaks? Because this is very important as a planning commission who looks at your variances and your CUPs and your septic systems. How do you want that established? And so I think after we're done, then maybe, you know, we welcome any comments and feedback that we can go through the process and talk about maybe problems with the current version as it was published, and what you as residents would like to see corrected, changed, what you would like to see continue. And even if it's against Katie and I, that's okay, that's not a problem. Our terms are going to be up in a couple months anyway. But we need to think beyond our terms. We need to put this out into, you know, a 5 or 10-year plan as we finish out the 1999 PDA agreement with the North Oaks Company. What do you want to see your government elected officials do for you?
And I think what's going to happen is Kara and I will make every effort to get that. We are taping the meeting thanks to the Demovics, and so what we want to do is get that to the new city attorney to see if they can look at it. But we also have a council meeting next week, and I think part of what our reports will include is what happens tonight, so that we can tell the whole community, because not everybody is here, but we can also be there with the other city council members to say, this is what's happened, and this is what the residents are telling us. So our plan is to go back and make that part of our report, so that that doesn't, you know, we don't give it up, and we have it, we'll have it taped. So we'll make that available to people. If you signed in, I asked for email addresses. If you didn't sign in, there is a pad of paper going somewhere. Just make sure you sign up maybe when the meeting's over, and we'll be happy to share with you where we posted the this meeting after it's over. So, questions? Who wants to start? How do you guys feel? Okay, Mark. I would say just stand up and belt it out. Tell them who you are.
Okay, I am Mark Ash, 34 North Oaks Road. I formerly represented this area in another generation. Before discussing any of the specifics, my biggest concern is that the city council and the city manager at this point do not seem to understand their role as an elected government. It is important for democracy to work, for the rules to be followed. When you don't follow the rules, you cannot have confidence in the outcome. And this is a perfect example of that kind of activity. The city manager needs to be pulled up short. In my presence, I heard him tell another person, we have the majority. The city manager, the city administrator, works for the city. He doesn't work for the mayor. He doesn't work for the majority. His responsibility is to provide support to all members of the council, to all the committees that are appointed by the council. And I think what I see, if I see a group on the city council who act as if they have no experience in government, and I find it extremely distressing. It is appropriate to have differences on policy. Part of what we're discussing here is differences in approach on planning. It is not appropriate to nobble the process. And I think that I don't think the mayor has the authority to cancel a special meeting. The reason you create special meetings in ordinances and in statute is to control the majority, to give a voice to those who dissent. For the city manager to follow through and cancel the taping of this meeting is a total failure on his part to act as an honest staff support for the city. And I think questions need to be asked. These are the kinds of things that the state auditor looks at in other cities, and I think we may need to get outside levels of government involved if the city majority on the council is unwilling to behave in a rule-based manner. They will still get an outcome they desire if they have the votes. That we can deal with in November elections, but they have to follow the rules.
Thank you.
We do allow clapping.
All right, Al.
And smiling. I'm Al Hitella, from longtime resident from 15 East Pleasant Lake Road. This is a little background, but I think it's relative to our discussion and deserved criticism that we're going to be hearing today. I had the opportunity to meet Louis Hill in the last 2 years of his life at North Oaks Club. And he was a very humble man, but he was a very passionate man. And I asked him, what is your vision of North Oaks? And he said, there are three things. One, first of all, this is not a bedroom suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul. He said, we have three priorities. One, safety. One, privacy. And three, environmental integrity. Now, they can be woven together pretty much. But I think that if he were to look at this community today, he would say, yes, we're there. We have a good environment. We have a lot of privacy, and we have a lot of safety. But I think it's going down a notch. Anytime we take a big leap to try to finish the development through the North Oaks Company, as they're proposing, this is a big leap. But if you go out, when you come in the gate, and there's a little rise past where the gatehouse used to be, and you look up, and you see those trees, they're absolutely magnificent. And they're almost overarching the road, almost an umbrella over the road. And you can, and if you do that every once in a while, you can realize how environmentally unique this community is. And you know what? Guess who planted those trees? Louis Hill, with the help of a guy by the name of Joe, who's going to be planting some trees for me, who's about 80 years old, who lives in Hugo now. But that's an example of the vision that Louis Hill had. And I'm sure this vision is slipping a little bit. You know, it's inevitable. We've got more homes, we got more cars and more bicycles, and we're losing our. I can remember going down to Pleasant Lake, on the banks of Pleasant Lake, and picking wild asparagus. You don't see that anymore. You don't see pheasants running through your yard. So we are slipping a little bit. But I think we've got to be mindful of Louis Hill's vision and try to adhere to that. And I think we're going to be a better community if we do that. If we don't jumpstart everything and end up with more access roads through our property and through our roads, and more people who don't belong here, problems with safety and with security. So I just hope we keep that all in mind as we discuss what's happening with these proposals, whether the city council has breached the 1999 agreement or not. Let's try to look at alternatives, other solutions, rather than going too much into criticism.
Great, thank you, Al. That's a great reminder. All right, I haven't counted the people, but we're packed in here. So if you can try and keep your comments I don't want to limit you and I'm not going to time you, but just try and be specific and brief, or as brief as possible. Okay, who wants to go next?
Maybe while you guys are thinking, I'd like to follow up on Al's comments. He brings up how we're doing this PDA, the 1999 development with North Oaks Company. I think that's an important point. And it highlights the fact that the Planning Commission will play a vital role when those initial applications come in. So that's why we're here, because as those applications are coming in, it's imperative that we don't have this 3-year period where people, such as the North Oaks Company or somebody getting a variance, can easily come in and challenge any decision coming out of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is scheduled to have their first meeting on Thursday. There was some discussion with some of the council members that they thought this could be held off until the next council meeting, but I want to get feedback maybe from the community, because is it wise to wait to the next meeting or have the Planning Commission hold a meeting without understanding who are the valid members of the meeting? Do you want them to be able to have meetings while this gets sorted out, and then those decisions that come out of there might be more easily challenged? Maybe some of the people could give feedback regarding sort of the conflict that we're now in, the debacle we're now in with these conflicting ordinances, and how we as a city, in terms of process, should we be just waiting to the next city council meeting to handle it, or should we be addressing these concerns right away and cleaning it up? There was discussion about, well, we would be taking up more of our lawyer's time, but isn't it more efficient for a lawyer and cheaper for a lawyer to figure it out now versus having to kind of clean it up later in addition to other application challenges that may come down? It just seems possibly a more efficient process to be dealing with it tonight, and unfortunately we don't have the other members of council here to raise the issue, but we do, even as a minority, have the ability to talk to our council to say, hey, this is a valid legal issue. Who has the right to sit down at the meeting on Thursday, and what will be the impact or conflicts that we would face as a community if we wait till the next council meeting to clean this up? It might also be a good idea to talk to our council, our new attorneys, and say, how much time do you need? What process do we need to go through to correct this? How long will that take? How many Planning Commission meetings will be affected because of that length of time? I mean, maybe we could get some feedback from the community about even the process, how we should go about cleaning this up as city council members with our new attorneys.
Well, Training Santa Lewis through Red Maple Lane. I think what I would love to see, if I got to choose, if I got to design my own process, I would love to see a whiteboard thrown up, and I'd love to see every single concern that the residents, that the council members, that the planning commissioners, that the Natural Resource Committee or Commission, I'd love to see all of the concerns that they have with the original ordinance as it was on the book. And I'd like to, I mean, that original ordinance, whether you think it's perfect or not, it was functional. So I would love to see all of those concerns, and then a discussion go on, largely probably philosophical to start with, conceptual, of what works and what doesn't work. What concerns do we think are valid? What concerns do we think really don't hold any validity? And then let's design solutions that create a mutually agreeable outcome. When I look at the concerns that were raised by the council members in the editorial that was in the paper, in talking with my neighbors, none of it seems insurmountable. It all seems fairly straightforward in how it can be accomplished with straightforward solutions. So I would love to see like a real old school elementary whiteboard moment, blackboard moment, where there is no bad idea and we figure out what is the best. And I think that's the wisdom of democracy. There's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that, there's conversation, and what we come to is something that will hopefully serve the community for as long as the previous ordinance did. So that's, I mean, in terms of the resolving the ordinance, that's what I would love to see, if I gotta choose my, design my own project.
Thank you. So going back to what Ms. Gamser said, some of the original points that were raised by the council supporting the passage of the new ordinance 130 were as follows. It was stated that we need the ordinance 130 to modernize our ordinances, enacting best practices of other communities. It was talked about passing it because of the comprehensive plan, because it was not completed in a timely fashion. It was also stated during meetings that the annual Planning Commission report was never submitted to council. Voting on issues twice, once at the PC and once at the City Council. Other reasons cited for the new ordinance. The Planning Commission needs to be kept separate, independent, free from bias, free to vote conscience. Too much overlap between the City Council and the Planning Commission. To have community inclusiveness. To address conflicts of interest. To address financial stipends given to the planning commissioners. NOAA should have a representative on the planning commission, and that attendance be a requirement. So these were all the reasons stated by the city council members that were in support of the ordinance to pass it. So possibly if we take the whiteboard moment, we could look at were each of these accomplished by the wording of the new ordinance 130 that was proposed. I mean, as I covered one, for example, the stipend. Previously in the old ordinance 150, it said planning commissioners shall not receive a stipend. Now it says they shall not receive a stipend unless the city council wants to give it to them. So does that clean up the conflict? And then there's others on here.
But if I may for just a minute.
Yeah.
The council also decided that the council liaison, who would be a non-voting member under this new ordinance, that they would be given $30 a meeting, which after Karen and I had been accused of having a financial conflict of interest, I don't know where it was because neither one of us has been paid on the planning commission, but they were going to give the council liaison $30, but then the council, as a council member, you also get a stipend. So that's like getting paid from two different places on the council and in the planning commission. To me, that just doesn't, it doesn't make sense.
Question in the audience? Well,
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Spearman. Sorry. I think if I could tack on to my last statement, I'd also really like to get from the new city attorney firm clear understandings of conflicts of interest and how we manage those. We live in a less than 10 square acre plot of land, all of us collectively. There are some farms that sit on larger plots of land than that. It is very difficult to find any of us that don't live within walking distance of a potential development site. Does that mean that we are unable to staff our planning commission because everyone has a potential conflict of interest? To me, that doesn't sit well intellectually or emotionally. I would love to get very clear understanding among all of us in the community. What is a conflict of interest? If there is one, how do we potentially manage that? And what are our expectations of our volunteer and elected officials in how those are managed? So that was my part two, thank you.
Thanks.
Bill McNee, 11 Sunset Lane. My concern with this whole process is in January, they appointed Katie to the planning commission.
To be the chair.
To be the chair, but appointed you not as a liaison, but as a voting member. So in January, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a conflict of interest. Everything's great. Now, 6 months later, 4 months later, now it's a problem. And I don't know what the real reason that they're doing this. You know, there's something behind it. I don't know if it's because the planning commission was being tough on the North Oaks Company, making them stay within the 99 agreement, or if it was, and I hate to say this, but we're not at the city council meeting, is it because the two women on the council ran for the election and ran with someone that was running opposed to the mayor? So I don't know what happened, but I'm afraid that they're gonna stack the planning commission or change it and to allow the North Host companies to get away with a lot different development than the 99 agreement. And if that happens, it's gonna hurt all of us here.
Thanks, Bill. Jack?
Jack Anderson, 3 Overhill. Couple of questions, and I felt like we'll follow up a little bit later. We're here tonight, if the main thing you want to do on the agenda tonight, if there were a quorum, was to get a vote to proceed with a request for a legal review, right? We don't have a quorum, so that's not going to happen tonight. Presumably, you're going to do that at the next council meeting. Yes, no? Or are you going to call another special meeting?
Even as a minority council member, we have the right to raise issues with legal counsel, because legal counsel, despite what's been said, is that
You're either going to have another meeting like this, or you're going to get an agenda item, and at some point, there's going to be a vote.
this will
This
carry on.
actually, will this item will be on the next council meeting agenda.
The request for a review. Okay, one of the things you might do is straw poll this group to say, how many people here would like to have a legal review done because of the inconsistencies that 40% of the council have on the process to get this new ordinance in place. And if you have that, at least whatever we are, you can count up.
47 or so.
You get a number. But you gotta get it, you gotta get in front of the full council, the request. We can sit here all night and talk about whether the new ordinance is good, bad, or ugly, but until we get the request in front of a voting body, nothing's gonna happen, okay?
Right.
So, that's my suggestion, and depending on where that goes, I have another suggestion on how you might temper the rest of the group that's not here.
Thanks, Jack, that's a good point. We do, as even minority council members, can raise legal issues with our new city attorney, and we do intend to do that, because we do believe that there are issues that should be looked at prior to the next
So from a
planning
timing
commission.
standpoint, we're not that far
Correct.
away to get some kind of action.
Correct.
Okay.
We do have enough experience being in the minority on this current city council to know that this issue will probably last a little longer, and we will probably come up with some obstacles during our way. But I think it's in everybody's best interest to have even the most basic issues looked at now by the city attorney, because they will have to look at this. And then at some point, yes, the city council will have to address some of the conflicting language that's here in the current ordinance as it was published.
I'm Sandy Jacobson at 2 Spring Farm Lane. And first I want to say thank you to the many, many people here who, by virtue of history, their many years living in the community, or by virtue of the hours and hours and hours that you have spent in recent months, I want to thank you for that, because we wouldn't be wherever we are right now without that, and we really appreciate it. I think so many of the ideas that we talked about just so far are very compatible, and they're good. What I wonder about is a little different angle of how do we get that heard, in addition to what you said when you talked about whiteboard ideas. It's a great idea. And I know that in one of the recent meetings, I understand that 100% of the resident comments were one way, and then the council, the majority, immediately voted the other. So we got a chance to say what we wanted to say, but it didn't make any difference to those who were doing the majority vote. And from the relatively modest understanding that I have of our processes, when you make the changes that have been proposed and perhaps accepted or not to the Planning Commission, we've lost a very valuable check and balance. When we look at what power and authority do we have to affect the continuing employment of the city administrator, we have little to no power. Well, it's with the majority. If we look at what power do we have to affect the membership of the city council, it's waiting till the next election. So I'm feeling a little powerless, and I think we can do a lot by continuing, and maybe it's the only thing we can do, by continuing to speak up and collect our voices. But it's also very discouraging to know that the majority has all of the controls on their side, if you will. And I'm not quite sure how we can really overcome that and how our voice can really make a difference. And I hope there are lots of ways, but I'm not sure of what those ways are right now.
Anybody got ideas for Sandy?
Please mark on your calendars November 3rd, 2020. I believe it's a Tuesday.
There's an election that day. Bill?
Bill Eklund, 15 Larkspur Lane. You know, everybody here agrees that the substance of this new ordinance and the way it was passed and the reasons for it are deplorable. But we are in the middle of a procedural crisis right now. It's clear that it was defectively enacted. It's not going to work. If anybody officially challenged it in court, there's always risk in litigation, but there's got to be a 95% chance that we set aside. So we need to do something now. And one of the things that I have a great deal of concern is that there are people in the Planning Commission and people that go before the Planning Commission that have serious matters that are going to be dealt with by the Planning Commission. And they've got a 3-year period of where these things can be challenged. I think that my first suggestion is you contact the city attorney's office and discuss this with them. I don't think this can wait till the next council meeting. Something really needs to be done now. And I think somebody should go to the Planning Commission if the city attorney's office cannot act quickly enough and point out to the Planning Commission, this is the problem we've got. And some of the people sitting on the Planning Commission may not actually be entitled to sit on that Planning Commission. More importantly, the people coming before the Planning Commission, the North Oaks Company, if you told them that they're at risk for the next 3 years for their developments, what's their reaction going to be? I mean, there's a lot of bad things that can happen as a result of all of this. And I think something needs to be done. I would suggest that you contact the city attorney's office and discuss this with them and find out if you can get some kind of an opinion or some kind of direction from them as to how we advise people how to act in the future of this. As I said, I don't think we can wait. By the way, as under Robert's Rules of Order, you can't act at this meeting because you don't have a quorum. But there are some things under Robert's Rules that are official. One is to adjourn the meeting. The second is to adjourn it to a specific time. The third is to set a time for another special meeting. So you have the authority to do that under Robert's Rules. You may want to consider that tonight too as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Jack?
Somewhat in the same vein that Bill just mentioned, I had hoped I'd be talking to the full council at this point, but I'm not. But eventually this thought has to get across to them. The council should be looking out for the financial aspects of the whole community. And should the council vote down the request to proceed with the legal review, it's over at that point, okay? However, nothing prevents some other party from challenging that in litigation, okay? And here's where the mix comes in. My background is insurance and risk management. One of the things I've learned a long time in there is things you do today, be very smart, because it may look like a lot of money today, but down the line, it's a lot more money. And that's why a lot of claims get settled before they get in front of a jury. So here's the line of thinking I'm thinking about. You vote it down, someone challenges it, gets before Ramsey County or who the litigation is filed in, and that litigation, the League of Cities would be brought in because they're the insurance carrier. And so now put yourself in the shoes of the League of Cities saying, wait a minute, we have to defend, maybe pay something that, on behalf of one of our clients, North Oaks, and they had a chance to do their own legal review. Now we have to do it, spend the money, and perhaps pay. They're not acting like good shepherds of the money. Especially since, oh, wait a minute, we, the League of Cities, just paid 50 grand for a wrongful termination suit for the city of North Oaks, and now comes this other thing on the planning commission. Perhaps we, the league, have to teach them a little lesson financially. Their deductible, which used to be here, now is here. And guess who pays that? We do. And the league did this, I think, with Lake Elmo. They moved the Lake Elmo City Council was fighting, and they raised the deductible to $250,000. And the citizens said, "Whoa, that's our money. We're now talking real money. All this esoteric thing of before, now 250 grand that the city has to pay, in fact, to you guys in taxes." So somehow that line of thought has to get across to the whole council, and maybe there'll be enough of them to see the light. Let's do the legal review now, rather than do something that's going to cost a lot more money down the line. So.
Thanks, Jack. Can we take a straw poll right now? Maybe it's a good time. Who would be interested in doing a legal review now versus making a motion at the next council meeting and bringing it up at the next council meeting? If you're in favor of doing it sooner rather than later, can you raise your hand? It's unanimous.
Okay, is there anybody, put your hands down please, is there anybody who doesn't agree with that? Okay, so it's unanimous.
Okay.
Yes?
Point of order, I'd just like to know where that list is right now that we're supposed to sign up on our email. Because I thought it was coming around, and it didn't come around.
Well, send it around again.
Thank you.
Nancy?
How are you going to inform the rest of the city, the rest of the residents who aren't here, what's going on? Since they wouldn't televise this, how is the information going to get out to those people?
Well, we're taping it.
And is it going to be on
And so what we're going to
Channel
do
60?
is we'll tape it and then we'll put it somewhere, and with the emails that we're getting from everybody, what we'll do is send a note out saying here is where you can get this, and then maybe we can find another way to get it to just people in general.
Do we need a majority vote to get it on the email blast from the city? That would be very helpful.
We can try that.
Okay.
We're happy to try it.
Well, you can put it on the email blast.
Here.
The link to.
The link?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great, Kathy. Thank you.
It's a community thing that our membership would like to.
And there's a whole lot more people on your email blast than on ours. That would be perfect, thank you.
Well, and while I'm standing up, I'd like to just pile on to what Bill and Jack said, that I feel like if the planning commission is compromised by being under the guise of two conflicting ordinances, any decision they make will be compromised also. So as we head down the road, even small decisions, but the huge East Oaks development decisions, we can't have those in a compromised situation where both sides could potentially, challenge them. I mean, that would just be the biggest mess ever. So I think we need to clean it up ahead of time before the planning commission can really make any decisions about anything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To Jack's point, by the way, all that will come home to roost, exactly what Kathy just described. Will come home to roost in the form of deductibles and premiums, in addition to massive legal expense, for the record, which will also lead to, my suspicion would be if that occurs with the city, there's going to be other litigation on behalf of some folks that have no interest in bearing that expense.
Yeah, thanks.
Tim McGrath, 6 Venture.
All right, anybody, okay,
Just,
stand up.
oh, sorry. Sarah Riddle, 1 Red Forest Way, and I was just, to learn more about the decision-making that happened, is there precedence for this ordinance change? Has there been, in the past, an occasion where the city council has changed the members of the planning committee? And then.
I've been on the planning commission since 2008, and it has been a very normal process. When everybody has a term of 3 years or so. It's usually 3 years unless someone resigns early, and then that changes it a little bit. But basically, they turn over every year, and every year the city administrator would come to us and say, we need to, we're gonna have 2 openings, or first they'd come and say, here, 5 of you are still have terms, but we have to fill it a couple. Do you still want to renew? Do you want to sign up again if your term is due? So then we'll know if we have any openings. And so then and usually in my experience over all those years, most people wanted to continue on the planning commission. You know, there are people that have been on the planning commission. I think Nancy Reed has been on there since 2007, so a year longer than I was. So we're kind of the oldest in terms of how long we've been on there. So that happened every year, and then and now it has changed with this situation now that we have with the council. But every year we always had an option to renew, and no one was ever booted. If someone quit, it was because they were working too much, or they had to go to kids' baseball games, or they had some reason to do that. But this year it changed.
Sarah, is your question about passage of the ordinance or taking on new planning commissioners?
Just asking has this happened in the past? And just looking historically, has this happened? Do we know what the process would have been and that sort of thing? I'm trying to understand why they would have done this. Because the timing is also confusing to me, because we're in the middle of the PDA.
Of a lot.
Yeah, we have there's so much going on right now, and I'm just trying to understand what the motivation for this was. Yeah, why would you do it now when we have this 2019 document that we're in the middle of working on? So I'm just trying to understand why not wait 6 months and that sort of thing. So I was just hoping you guys could shed some light on.
So there's probably people in the audience that know a lot more about the history of North Oaks than I do, but from what I understand, Ordinance 150, which is the previous ordinance that's still on the books because it wasn't rescinded or canceled at this point, that had been established decades ago. 1971. And to my understanding, very few amendments regarding that. To go to Bill McNee's point, the only difference that we have today is we had a planning commissioner who had the audacity to run for council and got elected. And that's the difference at this point in time.
That would be Carol. In interest of full disclosure.
Is it not true that the mayor served on both the planning commission and the city council? And I think it was in 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2014. Where was the conflict then?
It was actually longer than that, Nancy, because he was on the planning commission when I started in 2008. So he was on there for a very long time.
And serving on the city council at the same time?
Yes.
And he made motions and voted. I checked the record in June of 2010 and May of 2010. And so he actually participated, whereas now he's taking the position that the liaison should have no role, and even when Kitty was chair, in making motions or voting. So I want to be clear that there's a conflict in the action before and what he's currently suggesting today. Sure.
Paul Tilquist, 79 East Pleasant Lake Road. Are the ordinances, the two of them, 130 and 150, in any form that is readable, and would it be instructive for one who would like to know where the conflicts are? Or is it too difficult to put them side by side? Where are they, and could one read them in, you know?
They're not very long.
Okay.
And they both are on the city website.
Oh.
Paul, if I may volunteer, they are on the city's website, although it's very difficult because they're not, you know, it doesn't say, click here for Planning Commission Ordinance 150, but I'm happy to send them to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you know how to reach him, Franny?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Diane?
Yes, I understand the other council members were not able to be here tonight, as well as the city administrator. So I'd like to follow up, Jill Eklund, with your proposal. We could either adjourn the meeting, what were the three choices, fix the time at which to adjourn. There was a third one, but could you, because you're such a good person with Robert's rules, give us some creative ways of applying one of those three so that we could maybe fix the time at which to adjourn, or whether maybe we could do it right before the Thursday city council meeting, and then have that be recorded officially for people to be able to see. There's got to be a creative way that we can use Robert's rules to impose. Could you help us out there?
Yeah, well, I think under Robert's rules, you can reset this meeting. You can call for another special meeting at any time you want to. And you might want to try to pick a time that you think might be available, subject to your changing it based upon the availability of some of these other people. I have to believe that there is one night in the next week or two that all three of these council members that are not here tonight would be available. But you can go ahead and set another meeting if you want to, and then you can, if you can't get anybody to go to that, you can then cancel it if you want to. That's one thing that you can do.
Schedule it for right before.
Yeah, you could schedule one right before the next council meeting too, but I said we're in a procedural crisis, and we really are, and we should try to get as much done as soon as we can. But without the the ability of the willingness of these other three people to appear, I don't know.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and that may always be the issue for the next month or so. But you may want to just try to schedule one and see what happens.
Okay. Jack? Rich is standing up. Rich wants to talk.
Say something. Rich Demovic, 15 Black Lake Road. I haven't lived here for a very long time, but as I look around the room, many of you are my friends, and it's just been a really great welcome to this community. And as people stand up in this meeting and very articulately speak their mind, I am reminded of just how powerful a force this small community is. We have a lot of very bright people who care very deeply about this community. And that is a powerful force. It may appear, and believe me, I've spent a lot of time writing and talking with our city leaders, that they are not responsive. But there were not a lot of people here 5 months ago. There were not a lot of people here when this was first kicked off. A lot more people know about it now. Please speak with your friends and neighbors. Make them aware of what's going on. Because we have really bright people, and they're going to figure out a way. They're going to figure out a way to make a difference in the community, to be heard, because we've got some great things to say. So please engage your friends and neighbors and get them involved. It's been very, very well articulated here today. There is a real big issue that we have to resolve quickly. Others have stated it much better than I can. What I think was telling for me is I really saw a planning commission that was hitting the ground running. New members who were engaging, reading materials, coming prepared with questions, working well as a group together, not always seeing things exactly the same way.
Watching meetings from Namibia.
Yes, exactly. Watching things from very, very far away and working well together. And they were not asked, what would you like to see done here? They were in fact told what would be better for them and what would be more effective. And I really wish that they would have been engaged more, because I think they would have had some great ideas. They're a great group. They were working really well together. And then I'd just like to say lastly that if adherence to the 1999 PUD is a conflict of interest, if asking that development align with that document that was intended to serve for 30 years and to serve the community well for 20 years, if that's a conflict of interest, to ask for that, to demand it, then count me in. I'm conflicted too. And as somebody else has said here, we all are very close to this development, physically and emotionally, as part of what North Oaks is. And there were some things that were in that document that said, this is how we want to develop, that were clearly in violation of the PUD. Anyone who's read that document, especially those who wrote it, were well aware that they were violating the terms of the PUD. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they were hoping that no one was paying attention. We're paying attention. We care about this community. We care about its history and its future. I'm conflicted. If you're conflicted too, let's bring this emotion, let's bring this energy to our neighbors, make sure they know, make sure they're here, make sure they're at other meetings and expressing their opinions. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, Jack.
I would have a question, and I'll direct it towards Mark Asman. Ooh, wake up, Mark. I understand you have been appointed temporary chairman of the planning commission.
At the council's last meeting, they voted on that.
How comfortable you feel going forward, given what you've heard tonight, and what you may also know, in terms of multiple ordinances governing your actions?
I came to observe and see what people have to say here. I mean, right now, the council has acted, and there's no court order or reversal of the council's action, so I'm sort of caught in the middle. It's clear there's a challenge to the validity of what the council did, but you know, as of right now, we're going to have a meeting on Thursday, and we'll have to see what happens.
That might be an interesting meeting to go to, for those of you who are free on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the obligation of the sworn-in planning commission member is in directive from the council. It, you know, makes things difficult. Okay.
Mark, this is just kind of a point, but did you notice in the public notice that was in the paper, it says each member shall hold office until a successor is appointed and qualified, and the commissioner and subsequently becomes the member of this, or it goes on to say that. So it's interesting that they're pushing the issue to the next city council meeting, so that way they can, quote, appoint the people and then swear them in to the meeting when there's still a conflict. I don't want you to comment on this in public, but just something I want to state on record, that even in the new ordinance, they say that it takes a supermajority to remove a planning commissioner, and that they hold the office until the successor is put in that place. So the meeting on Thursday will be very interesting, because technically under the old ordinance and even under the new ordinance, we still have our seats. And then and then they've still appointed, despite that, despite notice and knowledge of that was given to them in the last two meetings, they still went ahead and appointed two new people. The way that the process was done wasn't transparent. They had planning commissioners that, and I'm going to transition this away from you now, Mark, sorry to point you out. The way the process was done was very interesting, because, and I don't want to, you know, the people that did apply and got appointed, they're fairly well qualified people. I don't want to pick on them because they're qualified, they're good community people. It's Rick Sandell and Jim Hara were appointed by the city council. But the process which the appointment was done, they say on record that the whole purpose is to go out to the community to get new people to apply and to get more people engaged. Yet 7 months after the last appointment period, they didn't go out to the public. As a council member, I was simply handed a memo at the meeting that said these people will be appointed or voted on today.
Personally, I would have liked to have seen a notice go out to the community that a vacancy is current, to let all members who are interested at that time, maybe people couldn't apply 7 months ago, maybe they can apply now, maybe they're qualified now or a conflict is over in their life. I would have liked to have seen the vacancy be posted, as many people apply as they want to, and then to really test, are these the most qualified people to fill these vacancies at this time? I don't believe that was done. I don't believe they went out to the community and did that. I don't believe that we're truly trying to involve people in the community in this process. Maybe some residents can comment on that, about how they felt that process was achieved by the city council.
Having run for and not be selected the first time, I received a letter from the city which informed me that should another opportunity materialize, I would be contacted and asked whether I was still interested. I did not receive such a letter. Perhaps others did, but if there were folks who were, maybe we could ask them, but I did not receive such a letter.
Thank you.
Brand.
And I was curious, so it's my understanding that at the last vacancy, there was a subcommittee formed to review applications for planning commission seats. And I am curious if that subcommittee was recalled at any point, or if it was brought back to order in order to discuss how those these supposed vacancies would be filled as well. It would be great to have some clarification on that point. If once a year we're gonna call for applications, and then those are the applications for the next year that we'll draw from, and so if anticipation at some point in the next year you want to apply, you have to apply during that next open call, or some sort of framework around how that process would be great. I think it was Mark Ash. I'm going to call my friend Mr. Mark Ash out at the NOAA board meeting when there was a vacancy on the, I think it was the Architectural Supervisory Committee. He had asked, okay, we're about to appoint these people. When's the last time that we audited the skills and talents that are on the current committee to see where we might need, when we send out that call for applicants, should we really be asking for somebody who has an architect experience or structural engineering experience, because that's something that we're really missing on that committee, something along those orders. So a rubric or a matrix that outlines the relevant skill sets and how that's being satisfied by the current commissioners, and how we might successfully solicit those skills and talents from our community. I think that would be a very positive thing for our community to have as well. I was a little confused that the subcommittee was not brought to order again, or if it was, that was not done at a public meeting.
It was not.
So I thought that was something curious, and I would love to see going forward.
We literally got a memo that stated the new people that were going to be voted on. Mark?
If you got a memo that stated who the people would be, who was the memo from?
I believe it was I don't have it in front of me.
I believe it was from Mike Robertson. If I remember, I can check the council packet, but I'm fairly certain the memo was from Mike Robertson to the city council.
It seems to me a question.
We learned about it in a council meeting, I think.
During the
council meeting.
It seems to me a question needs to be raised with the State Department of Administration, who's in charge of the open meeting laws, because how could that appear without discussion among some council people? And I think that is a question that they might look into to see whether there was a violation of the open meeting law. Unless he took it upon himself to pick the people.
I believe right now our ordinance states that new planning commissioners shall be appointed by city council. That's what it says. One item maybe we could discuss is, should we have that clarified, the process, so that way we're required to post vacancies to the public. Maybe we should be talking about amending ordinances so that way it always automatically goes back to the public to ensure transparency. To me, that seems more effective in this process than to simply give city councils memos that said, here are your two people, vote on them.
Well, I think this is a really great opportunity to talk about the distinction between rules and ordinances. rules are a great way to have consensus and our elected leaders on how things could be best accomplished. They're not hard and fast, they're essentially guidelines. But it would bring just really great consensus to have that, so we all understand the rules that are being used. I think that's just a great way to help clarify for the community what's going on. So I think those rules would be great.
We've had processes in the past, and a lot of this, I mean, we started by saying there's some procedural issues here. We've had processes in the past, for example, on how we would deal with the planning commission. It has changed. And it was not a decision that all of us were involved in. Paul.
I'm Paul Lucera, and I live on 31 East Pleasant Lake Road. I was a planning commissioner. I have been reappointed. I was looking forward to getting some education so I could be a better planning commissioner. And I was removed. I had missed a few meetings. I don't have a good excuse, but I was getting chemotherapy at the time. But I was reappointed, and then when I was laying in bed, it's almost like a TV soap opera. I got a call from Mike Robertson, the city manager, saying you've been removed. You're done. I really wanted to go back and be a planning commissioner. I was learning. I have a lot of construction experience. And to me, the most important part of the job that I thought was even better than my construction experience was that I wouldn't compromise myself regardless of what other people were saying. And I just think it's bad that someone who wants to give to the community can be removed at the whim of an elected official. That's all I got to say about it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Bill.
I'm going to suggest to Mark that you may want to discuss this issue at your next planning commission meeting. So at least so these commissioners are aware of the issue. There's not been a resolution of it, obviously, but so they don't get blindsided in the future if all of a sudden something happens. And that's up to you as to whether you want to discuss it or not. But getting back to what I was saying earlier, I think it's really important that you contact the city attorneys at this point. Give them a copy of this tape if you can, because this is a very serious issue. And they have an obligation, if they know about something, as an attorney under the Code of Professional Responsibility, to take some action if they think there's an issue here. So I suggest you do that as soon as you can.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. Other thoughts?
Gene Kaufman, One Basswood Lane. So what is the makeup of the Planning Commission right now? Are you challenging whether or not you should be on or not?
So I was the chair.
Right.
Up until just recently. The city administrator has said that we have been removed from the planning commission, but Kara has a term to fulfill, which is up at the end of this year. And as a planning commissioner, they're required in order to remove her, there has to be a 4/5 vote. There has been no vote taken. For me, I was the chair for quite a few years, and then this year they decided to do it on an annual basis and just appoint the chair on a one-year basis. It just kept renewing every year, it didn't change. So this year they appointed me for 1 year, and then I would be done at the end of the year unless the council decided to make me continue. And so you have to have a vote to remove somebody. So both of us have not been removed.
So do you plan on going to the next planning commission?
I think we'll be attending the Thursday night planning commission meeting.
That's good. Another thing that I'm wondering is what sort of time constraints are placed on the planning commission now? I mean, you've got new members been appointed. They've got to be brought up to speed. Are there things that need to be done in the next few months? Or is that fluid? I mean, can it go?
Well, there are
in terms of the East.
There are 3 new planning commissioners, and so what we were working on was I was trying to get some training for them, and I believe that this Thursday night they have someone from the new city attorney's office coming to train them. Unfortunately, they're training them on open meeting laws and things like that, and they really need to understand what a conditional use permit is. or, you know, something like that. So it's not the training I would have had as the chair put in place for them. And I don't know who's decided what this class is going to contain. We haven't been involved in any of those decisions.
Well, I'd like to see you, challenge what's been done and continue to participate. It seems to me that the planning commission was really moving along well, gelling, asking good questions. I thought you were fair, and to me, it seems like this has just been one big roadblock, and it's just, it really, I can't see it doing anything then other than bringing things to a standstill.
Yeah, thanks. I think the hard part right now is that we have these two ordinances in place, and we want to make sure, and I'll speak for myself here, we want to make sure that the Planning Commission is in a good place and is protected from any kind of legal issues or concerns. And at this point, we're really open. It's like we've got our backside showing and somebody can come and get us. And I really want to make sure that we have something in place so that we don't have issues. We don't have someone filing a lawsuit. So I don't really care which ordinance they use. Just give it to the city attorney and let the city attorney do it, because I know the city attorney, when she gets hold of it, is going to know where all the holes are. She's way better at it than I am, and she'll fix it. And that way, we want to make sure that the Planning Commission is secure and safe from any kinds of, legal issues in the future, especially with this big development coming on. So I think that's important, and that's what I want to see happen. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff Kim, 4 School Farm Lane. So you mentioned that there have been like kind of procedural abnormalities. Is there any kind of formal repercussions if they're breaking kind of what were agreed upon rules, or is this kind of just they can kind of do whatever they want and just wait for a legal challenge to try to define what was correct? Or it seems that there are a lot of
You try that one.
a lot of things that have been kind of.
Minnesota statute says 3 years. It doesn't become solid law. It's challengeable for up to 3 years. So a new ordinance would be in its infancy. It can be challenged. So you're opening up to a lot of risk doing that, a lot of unnecessary, unreasonable risk doing that. So procedurally, I'm sure there's been mistakes made in the past and people just went with it. I don't know if there's been this many mistakes made in the past. Or this much blatant political movement, but it weakens the city and it increase our risk to liability.
And the ordinance that we had been put in place in 1971, and I don't know if it had ever been challenged. Not to my knowledge.
And that governed maybe just dismiss the entire planning commission. Like that was something that would be laid out specifically in the ordinance, kind of as what you can and can't do, right? Or I'm not in a position of knowing that that's the case. I'm just asking, kind of. But did they have any free will at this point to change the process? Which is my biggest concern, is that the process can be changed in ways that might be hard to.
The process can be changed, yes.
And is there a formal procedure for that they're going to, or are they just kind of like winging it by dismissing people without?
There's Minnesota statutes that govern a lot of this, and then we have some ordinances that also provide guidelines. For example, statute number, or ordinance number 31. And there are some specifically outlined statements in there. For example, the chair can be appointed on January 1st of the year, and that was to coincide with the annual appointment of the chair, or the renewal of the chair. There's other guidelines in there, for example, how much notice you have to give for meetings, and what's the procedure when an amendment is supposed to be done, amending an ordinance. So a lot of that is outlined. Of course, some of the ordinance language does say shall be determined by the city council. So there's some of that in there too, but there's definite structure, and with following Robert's rules, it at least provides a solid outline where the city council should be more transparent with the community. And it provides for an understanding of what is being discussed, what's being passed, and how that would affect then the planning commission. When you don't follow those procedures and rules and statutes, you run into unclarity, effectiveness. Is it binding? What governs, the old one or the new one? And that's when you run into legal risk, and that's where we're at now, because we didn't follow the measures that protect us from that and make it a more transparent process. Sorry, Susan was first.
Hi, first of all, thank you very much for conducting this special meeting this evening. I think it's really important. First with a question, is your attendance at the Planning Commission meeting a de facto challenge to the new ordinance?
I would imagine it would be.
Some might think so.
Very good, okay. My second is more of a philosophical comment, just that laws and contracts like the PUD, the PDA, the EAW, the environmental plan done in anticipation of development, are all designed to address conflict. We live in a community of laws, and the clearer the laws are, the clearer the contracts are, the more likely it is that we can navigate our way through these issues clearly and effectively and efficiently and peacefully, which I think is something that we'd all like to see. One of the things that the minority provides in community is that voice of opposition, that let's be careful, let's make sure we're looking at everything before we kind of move forward quickly and effectively. It also can be the voice of the conscience and directs the majority to say, let's pause here, let's take a look at this, let's be thoughtful. I'm a little concerned that the voice of the minority has been characterized as the voice of the fringe in this community, that perhaps those who have been in development or the city longer have said, all of these residents despise development, they're against all development, they don't want to see any of this go through. I don't believe that that is the case. I speak for myself when I say I knew that development was going to occur because I knew an agreement existed, so I had an expectation. My expectation also was that that agreement would be followed. So I think it's important, to Sandy's point, is how do we raise the conversation from an us and them to of all of us in community trying to get to the right answer. And as I listen to that conversation, I say to myself, well, the more voices that get involved, the more likely it is that our majority leadership will say, well, maybe this isn't a fringe element, maybe we've been listening to the wrong counselors, maybe we need to start listening to our neighbors and say, boy, maybe we could be more thoughtful, because I can't imagine that anyone would be against having rules and laws that we can understand clearly, right? And that if I was on the planning commission, I could serve with a clear conscience that the people who put me there with a good foundation, that I know that I will serve for a period of time, that I will be given the information that I need to make good decisions, that I will represent my community well, so that when I provide a report to my city council so they can vote on things that are important, like the new applications for development, that they're doing so with the best information possible. Kathy very graciously offered up the email blast for NOHOA, or NOAA, depending on which generation you're in. And our homeowners association is the heart of our community, and it is the voice of our community, and I thank you for that. I wonder if there's another way that we can also lift our voices, either when we receive that email, if we can then forward it to our city leaders and say, I support a review. I support having clear, concise, well thought through ordinances that we can all feel really good about, both from a standpoint of the governed, but also those who are generous enough with their time to step forward and say, I'd also like to lead. And I would hope that that voice, if we can raise it and become an us, that we can see our way clear to some good decisions and really good decisions as we move forward in this next 10 years of development. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Dean? It appears we may on Thursday have 2 planning commissions. It's commingled, and I would submit that in the interest of all of our financial interests, that at that meeting, have your training, do whatever you want, but until this is resolved, do not make any definitive decisions on any application, because that opens us up. If someone comes in for a variance or whatever, that can easily be challenged on either side at any time until this is resolved. So I would basically shut it down. I mean, that seems rather severe, but I think until this is resolved, we are mutually all in danger of a quagmire, which we don't, of someone else's making, but we're going to have to live with it. So I would implore you to just meet, be friendly, and don't make any definitive decisions.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I didn't catch your name, I apologize.
Dean Edstrom.
Dean. So, under normal circumstances, I would completely agree with you. I do believe that there are certain statutory clauses that say if the company were to submit an application, that if it's not addressed in a certain time frame, then it's accepted by automatic de facto or whatever the proper term is. So there may be things that, for practical purposes, the Planning Commission, either they have to make a recommendation to the city and the city has to act on it. So I guess I would be maybe even more encouraging that the situation be reviewed legally, from a legal standpoint, by the attorneys that represent us, who are obligated by the Office of Professional Responsibility, and that we do find a way to move forward as quickly as possible in the interest of our city. Knowing the people that are on the Planning Commission, I suspect that it will be a very cordial, civil, productive meeting nonetheless. It does make me curious of, I know that the company has talked about holding some sort of community engagement session prior to potentially submitting applications, although we don't really know when they're going to submit applications next. And I also know that we potentially have a seat on the city council coming open. I don't know when the special election at the county commission seat is, so I don't know when we'll know if Marty is going to continue on the North Oaks City Council.
August 13th.
August 13th, so it's possible that very soon after the next council meeting, we have a vacancy to fill on the city council that could again potentially impact the majority-minority situation that's governing the planning commission at this point.
There will not be a vacancy if he goes forward to the general election. He does not have to step down unless he wins.
Right.
Okay. Well, so I guess all roads in my mind lead back to as quickly as humanly possibly resolving this with the sound advice of the city attorneys. So I echo Susan's commentary of as soon as we have some sort of vehicle to communicate, I will be doing that to my elected officials to ensure that, they're, at the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do, but so am I. And that is going to be to continue to engage my community and continue to voice my opinion of what I think might be the only solution at this point, which is resolving the discrepancy between the ordinances so that the planning commission can continue functioning in a just as fabulously as it has over the past 6 months.
Thanks. I would encourage all of you to make sure, if you've got concerns or questions or whatever, to send emails to council members or the mayor. Send stuff to the paper, letters to the editor of the paper, but be heard and voice your opinions and encourage your neighbors to do the same. It's important for us to know what's going on, and sometimes, this has been great, sometimes for us, we don't really get much opportunity to really talk to people like this and to hear what you guys have to say. And we try to get out a lot, and we try, we're happy to do this again, and if the guys don't come, we'll do it again anyway. if we've got something to talk about. But I think it's important that all of you have an opinion, not just, you know, the way you vote, but you should voice those opinions to the people that are in power and control in North Oaks and the city, and the homeowners association. Let people know what you think and what you want.
This is Kylie Funk. I'm at 2 North Mallard. I'm just wondering, I'm somewhat new to some of these conversations and this meeting, and as I look to educate my neighbors on this, is there any sort of like Cliff's Note version? You know, because I have some understand, you know, I've been trying to follow what's going on, but there's so many changes, and it feels like so many people in the room know a lot more than I do about all of this, and I'm just wondering what is the best way to do that. You know, I got added to an email, which I was really appreciative of, which I think some folks here are helping with. Is the best way to tell our neighbors to just add on to that email, or is there any kind of summary of these recent changes?
I think that kind of stuff is great. I know there are different email distribution lists going on around here. I think it's important to go to meetings too.
Yeah.
You know, or to watch them. If, you know, we couldn't take this tonight, we weren't allowed to, but watch them, you know, get some wine and cheese out and sit at home and watch it. It's a great way to get informed, and it's not that hard to do. And you can watch it at midnight if you want. You don't have to watch it when it's going on. So I think that's a good way to keep involved too. Yeah, Gary?
I have a lot to say, but I'm going to refrain. I do have a suggestion for both of you ladies for Thursday night. I would suggest that you take your chairs and sit down.
Mark, you're gonna need 2 extra chairs at the table on Thursday night.
Take your regular seats, because from my mind, legally, you're still on the planning commission.
Thank you, Gary.
Anything else? I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And know that Kara and I are here. You've got our email addresses. They're in the phone book. You can find them just about anywhere. Feel free to call us. Feel free to call us and ask questions, or say, can you come talk to my neighbors? You know, if we put neighbors together, will you come talk to us? We'll do a lot of different kinds of things. We're happy to have more meetings like this. You know, if you want, if we have different topics, or if you want to rehash something, or I think that it's really important for us to hear from you guys what it is that you're thinking about and what's important to you. And we want to make sure that we get an opportunity to do that. So however you want to contact us, we'll listen. Kara, anything from you?
No, we get often a lot of emails with very insightful comments from residents, and I encourage those to keep coming. And don't just email Katie and I unless you want to, but an email to the entire council, including Mike Robertson, informing us all is very important. And we're even willing to read stuff into the record if you're unable to attend a meeting, to take the podium. We'd be happy to do that as well, just so your voice is heard.
So are you adjourning this meeting, or are you going to end this, and with the proviso you might call another one?
The seat is still
Bill had mentioned something good.
Yeah, we have the Hill Farm Historical Societies coming in here at 7 o'clock, so we have to do some of that for him, or for them.
But how do we adjourn it?
But
So, Mr. Eklund had the comment that we should adjourn temporarily and continue at a
Actually,
different time.
you can adjourn, you can set another meeting right now, or you still have the right to call a special meeting anytime you want to.
yeah, we could just
Under
call
the
another,
terms of the
we could just
ordinance, you
adjourn
can
it and
call
call
later.
another meeting, right?
My suggestion is contact the city attorney, see what kind of response you can get out of them, how quickly, and then you can call another meeting, a special meeting.
But if it takes, Kara's right, if it takes 3 days' notice, because we did notice this on Friday.
Right.
So if we don't adjourn it, but we just
Well, what's the 3-day notice for?
to call a special meeting, we have to give 3 days notice.
24 hours. The ordinance says 24 hours for a special meeting. If I can, yeah, I can verify, but I believe it's 24 hours.
Yeah, it is.
At least for, is that for a new one? Is that for a new one, or is it?
No, yeah, 20 for a new one. You could recess this until tomorrow if you want.
I think we should recess it. There's two different provisions for notice. There's notice to the council and there's notice to the public. There's two separate provisions. One says 24 hours, one says 3 days. So we have to follow both guidelines. The more appropriate procedure would be to ensure that that 3-day notice period is met, so therefore adjournment of just for today and then continuing the meeting in the next 48 hours or when we can notice the next time would then allow us to overcome that 3-day notice period. That would be the safest way to continue this
Do you
discussion.
mean to adjourn or to recess?
You could recess if you wanted to.
We would have to recess.
Yeah, recess, if you recess, you can recess to a time certain or a time to be set, but that way your notices still stand.
Okay, so we move then to recess.
Did you have a comment?
This chair was hard.
Oh, it's.
His comment is the chairs are very hard. So I'll move then to recess the meeting.
Okay, so I'll second it.
All right.
Okay, so we're in favor.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good call.